ơi sai pri bu ơi sai sing persing sai pri ben ơi sai sing persing.
For thousands of years, the forests of Southeast Asia have been managed by a diverse group of cultural communities. Approximately 150 years ago, the forest lands began to be nationalized during the colonial period. Forest departments were established to manage forests according to scientific principles. After World War II, these forest departments began to experiment with industrial logging. Hello, I'm Mark Poffenberger, Executive Director of Community Forestry International. Our organization's mission is to support communities throughout the world in their effort to protect and sustainably manage their forests. Asia's forests are in crisis, as many of you know. Tens of millions of hectares of forests have been lost over the past decades, and even greater areas have been degraded. As this degradation progresses, the hydrological services of the forest start to break down. The groundwater, the surface water functions start to deteriorate. Biodiversity is lost. Erosion accelerates. But at the same time, the impact on rural people is equally severe. Communities in Asia are heavily dependent on forests for their livelihood. With the destruction of the forest, the ability of communities to sustain their lives in these rural areas deteriorates. And all too frequently, they end up as slum dwellers in urban areas, and their impoverishment is even exacerbated. Changes in the hydrology of watersheds can have severe impact both on upstream and downstream users. Surface water flows deteriorate, causing flooding in the wet season and drought in the dry season. Aquifers and groundwater can decline, often at a rapid rate, so that wells go dry. At the same time, rapid runoff can cause soil erosion that can silt water reservoirs, clog irrigation canals, and generally exacerbate flooding. Climatic change is a problem, both at the local level, where heat can increase dramatically in the hot season without the shelter of forests. When I first went to India in the late 1980s, the mood in the capital of New Delhi was very depressed regarding the condition of the country's forest lands. Over 50% of the land in the subcontinent was classified as wasteland. With this in mind, I traveled with my colleagues to eastern India. We visited some of the poorest tribal villages, and to our surprise, we found that communities had begun protecting their degraded forest land in hopes of restoring them. One villager commented to me, "We went to our forests and we saw a mother monkey, and she had her baby, and the stones were so hot because the land was barren that she couldn't put the baby monkey on the ground." And he realized that unless the forest had recovered, neither the wildlife nor the community itself could sustain itself in that environment. Indian forests have tremendous ecological resilience, and even though they had been logged, they had been grazed, they had been hacked by fuelwood headloaders, and were basically scrublands. Under protection, with the help of monsoon rains, they began regenerating rapidly. Growth of new shoots could increase at 1 meter or 2 per year. Within 5 years, close canopy forests had emerged, and birds and wildlife had begun to return to the forests. Food crops that had disappeared were also growing wild in the forest, and communities became increasingly encouraged by these developments. Neighboring villages started to replicate this community forestry protection effort. Each year, the number of community forest protection groups in West Bengal, in Orissa, in southern Bihar doubled. Cambodia has tremendous opportunities to reverse the deforestation of recent decades. The strongest allies for this process are the communities themselves. Hundreds of communities throughout the country are taking action as they form committees, establish rules and regulations for their forests, demarcate their forest boundaries, and begin patrolling. Their challenge as poor, rather disempowered rural people is to offset the pressures coming from powerful urban commercial interests that have other plans for the forest environment. The rate of deforestation has been driven by a desire to establish commercial plantations, whether they be of rubber, of cashew, of coffee, or other cash crops. Yet, without the forest, the communities themselves realize their continued livelihoods will be in jeopardy. And for that reason, they have strong motivation to see that their forests survive for future generations. It's critically important that Cambodia's rural people are supported by their government, by development agencies, by their NGO partners to succeed with their effort to sustain their local forests.
Sai pribu ơi, sai sing persing, sai priben ơi, sai sing persing. Hey nhà lời hơi ơi, cái tộc tết đặc tâm nắc điêu bên ơi.